Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick Podcast. And today we are going to talk about the Week 9 starts and sits. We're going to go over each game. I'm going to let you know whether or not they're a fantasy graveyard, a fantasy blowout, or a fantasy gold mine. Stay tuned for that. Here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick Podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. Once again, this is Jimmy Maverick, and I'm coming at you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thank you for tuning in to the Fantasy Maverick Podcast. And before I begin, hey, could you give me a thumbs up? Maybe leave a comment, share this with your friends, and of course, subscribe. All those things help me with that YouTube algorithm, and I do very much appreciate it. But let's get right into it. So we're going to go over each game for this week, for Week 9. And I've got 3 games to qualify as fantasy graveyards, 5 games to qualify as blowouts, and 6 games that are fantasy gold mines. So that should be a pretty good week. And just want to give you a little update on my teams. I was a little distraught on a couple of days ago because my teams had been really struggling, especially in the Fantasy Football Players Championship, where I've lost 3 in a row now on all of my teams, which was just shocking. But in fact, I'm not in as bad a shape as I thought I was. After the standings came out, the updated standings, I'm currently in 5th place, and I'm only 9 points behind the 4th place player for that final postseason, the playoffs. So that is a very easy hurdle to overcome. In the other game, I'm in 6th place for points. The leader is about 35 points ahead of me, so it's a little bit of a deeper hole, but it's certainly not insurmountable with 4 games to go. So I'm not in as bad a shape as I thought I was. I'm not the only team that's struggling out there, which is good. And then on the other side, on my personal leagues, my standard points league and my custom points league and my PPR league, those are the ones I do with friends. Those are doing great. Actually, they've come back very strong. I hit kind of a lull there in weeks 4 through 6, but weeks 7 and 8 have been good. Won both my games. Both those teams are back in playoff contention. So, overall, it's going pretty good right now. But boy, I gotta say, man, this has been a tough year with injuries and everything else. I hope you're doing good out there as well. But let's get right to the game. So let's start with the graveyards. And by graveyard, what I mean is that there's limited fantasy opportunity on both sides. You want to just minimize your exposure in these games because there's not going to be a lot of fantasy points scored. And so the 3 games to qualify, well, the first one is the Falcons at the Saints on early Sunday. Can either of these struggling offenses get going? And really, there's so many things going against them right now. As far as the Falcons go, the Saints have fielded a very good defense. I don't know if you've rostered the Saints defense. I have them in several of my leagues. They're great. They're basically an every week starter. Which is really good because they are ranking top 10 against quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends. So they are productive. They're producing turnovers. They're getting sacks. They're doing really good. So right now, when you look at the Falcons team, the strongest parts of that offense, in fact, are the quarterback, the running back, and the tight ends. So again, we've got the immovable object against the unstoppable force. Who's going to win? I'm going to put my money on the Saints defense, to tell you the truth. Obviously, the loss of Calvin Ridley is enormous. But as far as who you're going to start, you can start Cordarrelle Patterson. You can start Kyle Pitts. I'm having a tough time with my mouth this morning. It's not working right. Sorry about that. Anyway, you can start those guys for sure. They're going to be fine. The weakest part of the Saints defense is their pass defense. But of course, there's not a lot of pass catching options on this team. I think you can take a chance on Tajay Sharp or Russell Gage. But last week, neither of these guys got 7 targets, which is my threshold. They're both below that. I think they're probably good as a flex play in PPR. They're probably pretty safe there. But if you're not in that kind of a league, I would probably stay clear. Now, on the flip side, The Saints, the offense outside of Alvin Kamara is terrible. And of course, Alvin Kamara is a start. You're going to start him every week. I do like the fact that Taysom Hill is back in the lineup, and I do think Taysom Hill is a decent streaming option this week. Obviously his rushing ability, his nose for the end zone when he gets down there is all very good, and it is an easy matchup. So I think he's a great streaming option this week. Hopefully you picked him up if you need that. But as far as any of those receivers, I can't feel them. They're just not getting the volume that you need them to get. So I would bench all the Saints receivers. Still just waiting on Michael Thomas to come back. Who knows when that's going to happen. Next game, Patriots at the Panthers, early Sunday. Now, again, the Patriots offense has been pretty good. They've appeared to be getting better, but they're just not great for fantasy. Mac Jones is not a fantasy relevant quarterback. Carolina has a top 2 defense against running backs and a top 6 defense against wide receivers. But I think Damian Harris, obviously you can start him. He's getting great volume. And I do like Jacoby Myers. He is still getting decent volume. Dude still hasn't gotten in the end zone except for that 2-point conversion, which he finally he caught something in the end zone. It's amazing. Maybe that's a sign of good things to come. Hopefully he gets a touchdown this weekend. I seem to say that every week, but I think he's good for a start. But anyone else, I just really can't trust him. Hunter Henry only had 3 targets last week. That's not going to do it. I think that Jonnu Smith was about the same. Any of the other receivers on this team, they're just not getting the volume. So you can't trust them for fantasy. They're not a good choice. On the Panthers side, Sam Darnold has just been brutal the past couple of weeks. Obviously reverted back to his bad habits. And that really makes the whole offense suspect. So because of that, really the only guys I can recommend to start are DJ Moore and Chuba Hubbard. That's it. That's all you can do right now. The final graveyard game is the Bears at the Steelers. And again, you've got 2 struggling offenses and 2 pretty good defenses. This is the kind of game where I would start the defense for sure. But for the Bears, the Steelers have given up the 6th fewest points to running backs. And in any case, the only guy I would really recommend to start would be Khalil Herbert, the running back. So he's a risky start this week. And then on the Steelers side, again, it's the same 2 names. Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, you can absolutely start them. But everyone else is suspect. I think Chase Claypool can be started. But I do not like Pat Freiermuth this week. Chicago is top 2 against tight ends, so I wouldn't play that matchup, even though he has gotten pretty decent volume over the past 2 weeks. I think he's gotten 7 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. Anyway, I would stay away from him if you can. Now let's move on to the blowouts. Now, of course, the blowouts it's going to be great for one team. It's going to be terrible for the other team. So you want to minimize your exposure on the team being blown out, maximize your exposure on the teams doing the blowouts. Let's get right to it. We got the Jets at the Colts on Thursday Night Football, so that's the Thursday night game. And as far as the Jets go, how much faith do you have in Mike White? I mean, certainly he put together a great game last week, and it was an NFL record for a rookie in his first game as far as his performance. That's very nice to see, but was that just because he had to come in and nobody's game planned against this guy? You know that the Colts are going to be game planning against Mike White specifically. Again, who are you going to start on the Jets? Obviously, Michael Carter, I think, is a great choice. Man, what did he get, 14 targets last week? That's unbelievable volume for a running back. So he can absolutely be started. He is going to be a part of this offense regardless of the game script because of that pass-catching prowess, so that's great. But he does face a top 3 defense against the run. But again, pass catching kind of offsets that, so I think he'll be fine. Let's see here. As far as the receivers go, Corey Davis is probably out. So I think both Elijah Moore and Jamison Crowder offer flex value. Again, better for PPR than for non-PPR. But anyway, I think those are the guys you can play off of that team. Now on the Colts, Jonathan Taylor is the obvious start. The Jets are number 1 for opposing running backs. So I see a game script where it's just going to be hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor the whole time. And I don't think that I don't think that Carson Wentz is going to have to pass a lot, so I think he's a risky start this week, even though he's been playing very well. Michael Pittman, obviously a start. It's he is facing a top 5 pass defense, but he's been getting such fantastic volume. He's going to be totally fine. And right now, most of the other Colts in this game, just too low a volume for me to trust them. Mo Alley Cox is getting 3 targets a game. Nyheim Hines getting 6 touches a game. You can't start any of those guys. So that is who I would play off of that team. But it should be a good game for the Colts. Now, let's see here. Moving on. Okay, so Broncos at the Cowboys. So, again, I'm saying this is going to be a blowout. I think the Cowboys are going to blow this thing out. On the Broncos side, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, still in a 50-50 split in that backfield. That makes them very hard to trust. Plus, it's a tough matchup. Dallas is top 10 against the run, so I would sit them if you can. Bridgewater didn't target any receiver more than 4 times last week, so that makes it really hard for me to trust Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton, but it is a good matchup for them, and I do anticipate negative game script, so I think I think you can probably roll with those guys. I think you're going to be fine if you start either of them. As far as the Cowboys go, I think everyone's a start on the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Ezekiel Elliott, all good to go. Dak Prescott and Dalton Schultz are the ones that face the toughest matchups. Both are facing a top 10 defense at their position. So I'm going to play Dak. You don't sit Dak if he's healthy. And he has a great connection with Schultz. Schultz has got an excellent volume, so you can't pass that up. I'm going to start them both, despite the fact that it is a tough matchup for them. Plus, the Broncos lost Von Miller this week, so how's that going to impact the defense? We don't know, but I'm guessing it's going to make the Cowboys' job a little bit easier. Next up, we've got the Bills at the Jaguars. So who do you think is going to blow out this game? Come on. On the Bills side, Jacksonville can't stop anything. So, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, Zach Moss, all starts. I like Emmanuel Sanders as a flex start despite his goose egg last week. I think that was just, it was just a bad game. But I think he's been getting decent enough volume that you can put him in your flex. He should be okay. And on the Jaguars side, gosh, I just don't. First of all, the Bills' defense is rock solid. They are top 10 against every fantasy position. So that's already a tough matchup. The second thing is the Jaguars are coached by Urban Meyer, who sucks as a coach and who can't coach and who should be fired after this season, hopefully, but it probably won't happen. But I can't trust the volume on any of these receivers. I think James Robinson or Carlos Hyde, whoever is healthy and who starts, I think is okay. But again, it's Buffalo is number 1 against running backs. So it's going to suck. It's going to be just a really bad game for the Jags overall. I would not start anyone on the Jags if you can avoid it. It's going to be a bad game. It's probably going to be one of those 40-0 games. So that's what's going to happen. Next up, we got the Dolphins at the Texans. So I think the Dolphins have been playing better offensively. They've been doing much better. I think Tua is a great streaming option this week. Good matchup. And I also like Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki. And I think Gaskin is a good play. The Texans defense is top 10 for opposing running backs, so I think that's a good choice. And he has been over 15 targets and touches for each of the past 2 weeks. That's really good to see, so go ahead and start him as well. On the Texans, I've been saying this every week, man. You can only start Brandon Cooks. That's it. End of story. There's no one else you can start on this team, so just go with that. Next blowout game, Raiders at the Giants. So guess what team is tops in the AFC West right now? I am shocked that it is the Raiders, but they've done very well this year. And the whole situation with Henry Ruggs is troubling. But I still trust this offense. So you've got Darren Waller should be back. He's going to be good to go. Hunter Renfrow is also a great start. He should see a bump in volume with Ruggs out. Jacobs should also be back from his injury scare, so I think you can start him here as well. So I think all those guys are good. Bryan Edwards, I still got to see what his volume is going to look like. He just hasn't gotten enough volume. That's the problem. He's only getting like 3 or 4 targets a game. It's just not enough. He will probably see a bump now that Ruggs is out, but we don't know how much, so I would not start him. As far as the Giants go, the Giants are just like one of my fantasy teams right now, where it's just this constant rotation of injured players. This is just not playing. So, again, the Raiders are 4th in the league against wide receivers. And when you talk about the walking wounded of the receiver core of the Giants, you really just can't start any of them. Devontae Booker is the only player I would start. I do expect Saquon Barkley to sit again. I think they're going to hold him out. He's going to come back after the Week 10 bye. So they're going to hold him out this week and next week, and then hopefully he's back for the Week 11 game. But aren't you glad that you didn't draft Saquon Barkley? I got to say, man, I'm very happy that I don't have him in any of my teams. But believe me, I've drafted my own, messed up players, CMC, Kareem Hunt, A.J. Brown, who was awful until like 2 weeks ago. Now he's great. But, you just try to avoid those landmines in your draft. And I tried to talk myself into Saquon. I couldn't do it, and I'm glad I didn't. So now let's go on to gold mine games. So this is good for both sides. Both sides should be very productive offensively. Let's get right to it. Vikings at the Ravens Sunday early. Baltimore has a very generous rush defense. So I expect this game to revolve around giving the ball to Dalvin Cook and just letting him run with it. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have one of those low-volume passing games. But I think he will bounce back nicely from last week. He always sucks in primetime games. You never start him in a primetime game. So I think you can start him here. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen are obvious starts. KJ Osborne usage has been too volatile for me to recommend to start him. Past 4 weeks, 7 targets, 4 targets, 7 targets, 3 targets. You can't play that. You can't play that. Don't play that game. Don't start him. For the Ravens, the Vikings defense is top 5 against tight ends, top 8 against quarterbacks. But, of course, that's the 2 best players on the Ravens, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. I'm not going to sit them, so go ahead and start those guys. Latavius Murray is probably back, so I think you can definitely start him. I wouldn't trust either Freeman or Bell this week, unless I would trust Freeman if Latavius Murray is not a go. Again, I'm recording this on Wednesday morning, so I don't know what the practice reports are yet. But like I said, you want to monitor that situation. And then as far as the receivers go, I think Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman get the best matchup here. So I think that's what they're going to primarily focus on offensively. That's going to be great for both those players. I think they both have big games. Next goldmine game, Browns at the Bengals. And now, as far as the Browns go, the Cincinnati defense is not imposing at all, as we saw last week against the Jets. Nick Chubb and Jarvis Landry both get top 10 matchups and are definite starts. I do not trust OBJ anymore, even with the great matchup. The dude just there's just no connection between Baker Mayfield and OBJ. They hate each other, and I'm surprised they did not trade away OBJ, but he is an anchor on this team right now. So don't start him. He's a mess, and I'm glad again. Didn't draft OBJ in any of my leagues. Was not tempted at all by his draft position. You knew he was going to suck. He sucks. Okay, so let's see here. The tight ends for the Browns, you also need to sit Hooper and Njoku, as that is the toughest part of the Cincinnati defense, plus their volume is terrible. So you got that. On the Bengals side, Joe Burrow is a start in a great matchup. So I think he's going to do very well. He should bounce back nicely from last week. Chase, Higgins, and Boyd are all starts as well. Very easy pass defense. The riskiest player to start is Joe Mixon, because the Browns' rush defense is top 5. But you're still going to start Mixon. You can't deny the volume he's going to get. He should be productive enough to be good for fantasy. C.J. Uzomah continues to get 3 or 4 targets a week, so I'd sit him too. Last week, again, he didn't get a touchdown, and so what happens is he sucks. He gets you like 2 points. You can't play that. You can't play a 3-target guy in your starting lineup. So just, again, don't start Uzomah. Next game, Chargers at the Eagles. So the Chargers have been extremely disappointing the past 2 weeks. Actually, it's the past 3 weeks, but they had a bye in the middle. So I don't know what's going on there. But this should be a, again, I can't sit. I can't sit Justin Herbert. I can't sit Mike Williams. I can't sit Keenan Allen, even though they all have a tough matchup. I think it's going to be fine. I do expect the offense to run around Austin Eckler, as the Eagles' rush defense is the weakest part of that defense. He gets a top 2. So the Eagles are giving up the second most points to running back. So I expect Eckler to be used heavily. And I also like Jared Cook as a start, who also has a great matchup as well. I think it's a top 10 as well. On the Eagles side, Jalen Hurts is great for fantasy football, so go ahead and start him despite the Chargers being top 4 against running backs. Dallas Goddard is a start. It's a top 3 matchup for him. If you're going to roll the dice on this backfield, and again, last week it was a 33% 3-way split between Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, and Kenneth Gainwell. So anyway, who would I start out of that backfield? I would start Boston Scott, but I would sit these guys if you can. Don't play him if you don't have to, all right? And Devontae Smith volume has been all over the place past 4 weeks. 9 targets, 4 targets, 9 targets, 3 targets. So I would sit him as well. Again, you can't trust that volume. He's going to burn you. So don't play that game. Now, this next game is a gold mine game, but it could very easily be a blowout game. And that really shocks me to say that. But we're talking about the Packers at the Chiefs. And the Packers doing great. They knocked off the only undefeated team in the NFL last week. Now they get to face struggling Chiefs. They get Devontae Adams back. So anyway, go ahead and start Devontae Adams, of course. I don't trust any of the other receivers on this team. Of course, you can start Aaron Rodgers. Of course, you can start Aaron Jones. And I also like A.J. Dillon, because I think he's going to be a good flex play this week as well. On the Chiefs side, you got your 3 auto starts: Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill. That's great. And I think Darrell Williams you can start as well, just a volume play on the ground. But I don't know what the problem is with this offense, and I don't know why they're struggling so much. It seems like, they've figured out, defenses have figured out how you rattle Patrick Mahomes, and they're doing it. And this team hasn't yet found an answer to offset that information. So hopefully this will get back to this. But like I said, that game could very easily become a blowout. And that would shock me, but it wouldn't surprise me to see the Chiefs get blown out. They're just not playing very well right now. So it's a shame to see, because obviously Mahomes right there, he's one of my favorite players in the NFL. It sucks for me to watch him struggle like this. So that's too bad. 2 more games to go. Cardinals at the Niners on Sunday afternoon. Kyler Murray gets a top 4 matchup, so he should bounce back very nicely from last week's disappointing loss. San Francisco is top 10 against all the other positions, though. So wide receiver, running back, and tight end, top 10 against all those positions. Hopkins was dealing with a hamstring injury last week. That's why he didn't do very much, but he is not listed on the injury report this week. So I'm guessing he is fine. He is good to go. Should be much better. Obviously, you can start him. I also like Chase Edmonds, who has been heavily involved in the passing game. So he should be good as well, regardless of how this game is going for the Cardinals. And as far as Christian Kirk or Zach Ertz, their volume just isn't enough. So I would sit both of them. Again, they're like getting like 5 targets a week. It's just not enough for me to want to put them into my starting lineup. Finally, James Conner is the goal line guy. I think he's a great flex play every week because of that, because he can get the touchdown, and he has been getting the touchdown. So that's good to see. On the Niners side, Deebo Samuel, Eli Mitchell, they're both designated as questionable right now, but I do expect both to play, so they are both automatic starts. But outside of those two, you really can't trust anyone else on this offense, and you're gonna just disappoint yourself if you start anyone else. So just go with those 2 guys, and you'll be fine. The final game, Sunday evening game, we got the Titans at the Rams. And this is going to be interesting to see because the loss of Derrick Henry totally changes the Titans' offensive game plan. So I do expect them to become more pass-heavy, and that should be very good for A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. If he comes back this week, it looks like he will probably play this week. And Ryan Tannehill should see a step up in his passing volume, so that's good for him as well. I think all three of those guys are starts. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with the backfield. Jeremy McNichols and Adrian Peterson are both very risky starts because we don't know how it's going to go, what kind of role they're going to have. If I was to start either of those guys, I think I'd be more inclined to start Jeremy McNichols because he is on the team, in the system, and he has been playing this year. He has been involved each week, mostly in the passing game. But I do see a situation where it's probably going to be Adrian Peterson as the first and second down back, and Jeremy McNichols is the third down change of pace back. That's probably what it's going to be. If I'm going to bet on that for fantasy, I'm going to go with the third. I'm not going to go with the 36-year-old running back because I could see him getting like 18 carries for 59 yards, something like that, where it's not going to be worth anything. But I think the high value touches and targets are going to be going to Jeremy McNichols. So there you go. As far as the Rams go, the Rams offense just cruising right now. And the Tennessee Titans are going to be happy to keep it going because the Titans are top 10 for Cooper Kupp, for Matthew Stafford and Robert Woods. Start all those guys. Darrell Henderson gets a tough matchup, but I'm going to start him anyway. He's getting great volume, so definitely go with that. The one guy I would sit would be Tyler Higbee. Oh, I'm sorry. I would not start Higbee or Van Jefferson, as both remain below my threshold for volume on a week-to-week basis. So there you go. That's it. That's all a week. That's all the Week 9 games. And so I hope your teams are doing well right now. Obviously, we're starting to get to the point where we really got to start thinking about the playoffs. But just remember, we've got an extra week in the regular season. Most leagues are going to go till week 14 or 15. So we're still only a little bit more than halfway through. There's still a lot of time to make up any ground you need to make up. So that's why I'm not concerned at all about those FFPC leagues of being in 5th place or in 6th place. I know I can make up the gap because it's not that much of a gap. So anyway, good luck in Week 9. If you got any questions about any of these games or you want to talk about any players, please leave it in the comments down below. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much for sticking this out and watching the whole thing. I do appreciate it. And have yourself a great fantasy day. We'll talk to you soon, everybody.